Do you have any clarity on where that two-thirds number could be from? And based on the investor base and how they have held the stock in the past, is it your belief that two-thirds would, in fact, opt to remain in? And I'm also just curious, is if a large fund like a Fidelity, for instance, a major shareholder of Tesla, would be able to maintain such a large stake in a completely private company?
Yeah, well, great questions, first of all, and thank you for having me, and good afternoon. Look, this is a little bit of a sideshow from the main issue at hand, which is tracking to profitability. And why I bring that up, in a prior life within our career, my career, I worked at a place that provided debt financing for private equity buyouts. I mean, there are and there's no shortage, certainly, of diligence that has to happen. There are investment committees. There's risk management assessment. So at the end of the day, to underwrite a deal, regardless of how long any holder has had the stock, requires, a significant period of time, right? And so we think we're missing kind of the forest for the trees a little bit here. I know Elon, is a headline a minute. But at the end of the day, I think, tracking to profitability was what we were focused on before. It's what we're still focused on. It's what drives the stock. And I think you could see, the share price isn't discounting $420 a share. Obviously, the market doesn't believe this number, or it would seem it doesn't believe this number. So I still think everything relies on Model 3 deliveries, tracking to profitability in the third quarter, cash flow positive in the back half of this year. And that's what we're most focused on.
I think the reason we bring it all up, Jamie, is because Elon Musk's future could be at stake here, right? When we start talking about the SEC, et cetera.
Sure.
So that's why we spend so much time figuring out was funding secured or not, because would you argue that he is super important to the future of this company, that he's got to still be the head of it?
Yeah, and I apologize. I don't want to come across as though I'm discounting the questions here. And certainly I think your point is exactly right. It's critical to his staying and remaining with the company. And look, if you had asked us that after the first quarter conference call, when he sort of blew up on some of our competitors publicly, the questions we were getting from investors was, what is this stock worth without Elon? Fast forward now 3 months, I think all he's really doing on some level is arguing against, his relevance to the company. The company is still ramping production. They're still ramping toward profitability, irrespective of what he's tweeting, presumably. Yeah, so all I think is really happening here is I think there's a lot of really smart people behind Elon. And if anything, he's making a case, unfortunately, for the board or for large shareholders to say, maybe he's not as critical to the day-to-day, and maybe he's more of a liability.
Well, even Mark Cuban admitted we cut him a lot of slack calling him an entrepreneur. Well, it's just Elon being Elon. But this time around with the funding secured tweet, was that stock manipulation in this case?
Well, I'm not a lawyer. I definitely don't want to go too far in opining on that. The SEC, it seems, from publicly available, media reports and so forth, has a preliminary inquiry. We'll see what comes of that. Yeah. I assume there are many lawyers earning, very much earning their hourly wage here, both at Tesla, probably among a whole slew of investors that maybe had communications with him. So that's going to have to play out over time, unfortunately. We're not in a position to kind of say yes or no, was that market manipulation.
Last question, Jamie. You started this whole thing of saying that we're missing the forest from the trees here and that there is a series of committee meetings that would need to take place. Bottom line, you don't think funding is secured based on what Elon wrote in that blog post citing one managing director at the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund?
Well, I don't think one fund could get it done, presumably. I don't know anything about the Saudi Wealth Fund in terms of their caps on individual holdings, but I would assume that, he may have had conversations with, long-term sort of futurists that believe in him, believe in the objective, believe in the disruptive capability of Tesla and EVs, and maybe sort of casually said, look, we're with you kind of thing. But even so, within these large firms, and we've been a part of several of them over our career, there's still boxes that have to be checked. There's still diligence that has to be done. And I find it hard to believe that this deal would get done without them demonstrating profitability.